So Lou, would you mind coming up and grabbing a seat here, and let's, would you all welcome me, help me welcome Lou. You know, I did what the whole board has been doing. I just introduced Lou Giuliano, who is not Rudy's brother. It's Lou Giuliani. So E-O, which way should we go?
It's Giuliano. Oh.
Do you think I should do O, or
yeah?
Okay. Because the right way afterwards? I apologize.
You're just to confuse everybody.
Exactly. How did it work?
Although I have to tell you that when Giuliani became mayor,
yeah,
it was the first time in my life people in this country knew how to pronounce my name.
So, or did you become mayor of New York City and he ran ITT?
No.
I don't know if you want to sit or whatever's comfortable for you, or you can wander around. So, Lou, you and I met, I was sort of going through some notes last night, and we met almost exactly 11 years ago at an in October of 2002 at an organization in Dallas called the CEO Forum. Would you tell the group a little bit about what this group is?
Sure. CEO Forum is a what I call a support group for Christian senior business leaders. Not unlike this type of session, but it's made up, it's out of Colorado Springs, and it's made up of senior business leaders, most of them CEOs, but not all of them. You run a $10 billion section of ExxonMobil, you become part of it.
I think that qualifies as being a senior business leader.
Yeah. And we get together a couple times a year. I think we were in New York 2 weeks ago, and we had Bill Hybels as one of our speakers, Mark Alpers, who's one of the members, who is the I think senior VP at ExxonMobil, runs their exploration production division. A few other speakers. So we get together twice a year on a national level. We get together 1 or 2 more times a year on a regional level. In the Atlantic region, we get together out there, and all the members in that area get together. But there's something even more important. I get on the phone every week for about 45, sometimes an hour, with one of the forum members. And I've been doing this since 2001. And there's also another group of 2 other forum members, so there's 4 of us that get together about once a month. We've been doing this since 2001. And there were times, there still are times, where I know more about these guys' lives than I do about some of my family members. And they have been a tremendous source of encouragement and sometimes admonition. Sometimes.
So an example of admonition.
When you you feel ashamed to say what you're doing when you hear what they're doing. And when they tell you about what's going on in their lives and how God's working in their lives and the impact. One of the guys is a senior VP at Walmart. In fact, the CEO of Walmart is a member of the CEO Forum. There's a couple other people from Walmart that are there. And one of the guys is in this group that I talk with regularly. And, when he goes to India, he talks to the president of India. You probably saw the Wall Street Journal last week or something about Walmart kind of pulling back from India and stuff. And I remember one time he was telling me about a conversation he was having with the senior leaders in the government of India. And when they first started trying to open the doors there, and he had, conversation went like, we'd like to come to India, and not because we want to sell things right now. We think that will be opportunities for that in the future. But we'd like to come in and try to buy stuff that you produce here in India, so we can help the people in India that are the poorest. And the Indian government counterpart said, I've never heard anybody say that. Why would you do that? And he said, well, we really see the 1 billion+ people in India as future potential customers. He said, but I have other reasons.
What was that? What was this other reason you had?
My God wants me to help you. And I personally want to see this done for that reason. When somebody tells you that, you feel like, what am I doing? But he did this, and he said, and you can imagine this, the relationship with this guy changed completely. The guy stood up and said, I feel the same way. And he hugged him. And that was a number of years ago. But that's what I mean about hearing what some guys do and what they're willing to do to serve the Lord.
Well, Lou, you're I've always been struck since the first I met you of how humble you are. And no one likes to be told that because that makes you even more embarrassed. But so, a little background in Lou's career, some 18 years at Allied Signal, running their avionics business, a big strategically important business. And then I think 16 years roughly at ITT Industries, running the defense electronics business, among other things, before becoming the chairman, CEO, and president. So you've been in an important industry sector, a tough industry sector, and you're also active in a number of organizations. Lou is on the board of governors for the U.S. Postal Service, the USPS, also has chaired the board as well. And perhaps he runs, we'll talk a bit about an organization in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding Virginia area group called Workforce Ministries, which is analogous to what we do at GLF, trying to connect the dots between faith and work, or the Wall Street Journal and the Bible. And perhaps your most important pinnacle accomplishment you've had is being on the advisory board for the Princeton Faith and Work Initiative. How about that now?
Well, there's one other thing that's a little higher than that.
Tell us.
And that's, I've had the opportunity to get much more involved in the life of my grandchildren.
Tell us a bit about that. So Barbara, you and Barbara have been married how many years now?
44.
44. Wow. I'm not even 44 years old.
Wow.
And two daughters. So you talk about Zach and his younger brother?
Jake.
Yeah. Jake. Tell us a bit about that, why that's been so special.
Well, first of all, we're very blessed because both of our daughters and a friend of mine back there, and our 6 grandchildren all live within 50 minutes of us.
That's great.
And I'm sure if you went around the room, then very few of you have that opportunity, that blessing. So we really consider that special and try to take full advantage of it. We spend a lot of time, we try to spend a lot of time with grandkids doing things. And like all teenagers, and I've got grandkids from 22 to soon to be 3. But having more time with my family in general, my wife, and with the grandkids has been, I consider to be the most important thing that I've done. You know, when you choose to stop being a CEO, you can't do. When it first happens, now, and I consider myself very fortunate because it was my choice. Business was doing fine. I loved my job, but I chose to leave because I wanted to do some other things, and most importantly, faith-related things. Because I just felt I had been so blessed. This was what I was doing and what I had been given was so far beyond any expectation or even dream that I had. But I said, I have to do something about this. And so I had the good fortune of being able to choose to leave.
Would you mind telling that story? We'll loop back to Zach. Would you mind telling the story of when you put your hand up and you went to the board and you began a series of conversations?
It's no fair. He knows all of it.
It's a terrific story.
Well, when I was thinking about when I had made my decision that I wanted to leave, I wanted to do something else.
This is 2004, 2005?
Yeah. And I went to the board and I said, I've decided that I'd like to leave. I'm not in a big hurry to leave. I want to do an effective transition, but I want to leave to do the same thing I just explained to you. I've been so blessed that I want to do some other things. I want to spend more of my time directly related to faith. Of course,
and yes, you told them that. So you didn't say personal pursuits or something. You said
that was the truth.
Yeah.
So their reaction was, "We believe you, but nobody else is going to believe you." And of course, you know, in that 2004, 2000 time, it wasn't too far removed from Enron and all the other accounting problems the companies were having. And so they said, "We need to hire a crisis communication firm to work this transition." And because they were concerned about what people were going to think. And so I, before I told anybody on my staff or anything, for about 2 months, I traipsed down to 30 Rock every 2 weeks to meet with this crisis communications firm to draft a press release. And after
what did they think of this idea that you wanted to pursue faith activities?
It was an interrogation. You know, I'd sit in a room and there was 3 or 4 people, the senior people in the firm, sitting around a big table saying, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, you know, I don't know. You must know something." I said, "Well, I could be doing this. You know, my wife and I have talked about a retreat center. We've talked about, you know, different things with counseling and stuff. But I don't know. But I believe that God will open doors. And so I'm not worried about it."
You see the press says, "God's going to open doors."
And I'll tell you, not to drag this out too long, but what happened was every time I went to the elevator leaving, the woman who was the CEO of this firm walked me to the elevator and said goodbye. She very nice of her. And I later found out that the reason she did that was, in her experience, even though they had all this time together and they were asking all these questions, the truth came out when the client was getting on the elevator and going away. That's when, well, you know, when this accounting problem gets over with, we'll all be fine, you know. That would come out as the elevator doors closed. So she learned to walk people to the elevator. Well, she was very frustrated because nothing ever came out. And I will tell you that the press release that came out said, "Chosen to leave to pursue faith-related activities."
Let's look at that press release, Lou.
Oh, you have that?
Just an outside chance.
This is not fair.
So here we are. Recognize it so far?
Oh, it's it, but I think
it does indeed. You can't read it. It says, "Giuliano indicated that his decision to relinquish his role as president and CEO stemmed from his desire to fulfill his personal goals. Quote, in the past few years, I've become increasingly interested in devoting more of my time and attention to efforts that directly serve my faith."
So that's basically what I told the board, and that's what came out. But the follow-up to that story is, we put that press release out in the morning, we had a conference call in the afternoon with analysts, investors, and what have you. The president of the crisis communications firm was there, a couple of directors were there to handle any tough questions, and there were no tough questions. It was, "Thank you, sorry to see you go, we wish you well." And that's how the conference call went. But the real important part of the story is, the next morning, the first phone call I got was from our largest shareholder, who said, "How did you make that decision? I struggled with that all the time." He said, do I keep working and contribute money to serve the Lord, or do I leave and spend my time, like you're trying? How did you make this decision? And I said, like most important decisions in my life, they get made for me, in essence, by the Lord. I said, I can't tell you how to make that decision. That's a this is where I came to. And he says, I lead a Bible study on Mondays, and this guy, he was in Texas, he had a 300-person Bible study that he led on Monday morning, and another group on Fridays, as well as being the president of the Dallas Salvation Army chapter, which is the largest in the country, and on top of running, billions of dollars of money. And he was struggling with that question. But then I got other phone calls from analysts, folks from Wall Street, who I had no idea had a faith, or their faith was important to them, and they were calling to talk about their faith. And I found that at work even before I chose to leave, that as my faith became more important to me, it was easier for me to, so to speak, let people know that it was important to me.
So let me pause there a second. You say when your faith became more important to you, were you kind of raised in a church tradition, or it sounds like you had some moment or series of circumstances that intensified your faith relationship, or were you always kind of this way?
No, I wasn't always strange.
This way sounds strange.
Right. But I grew up going to church. My wife and I basically went to the same church, went to Sunday school together. But we had met much earlier in kindergarten, so in Pella. And but we went to church. And she and I both said the same thing. We went to church all those years, never heard the gospel. Now, whether it was my ears or the pastor's words, not sure. I suspect it was me, as we all know God opens your ears and eyes when it's His timing, in His timing. And my wife came to the Lord earlier than I did. She's, I'm a slower learner, and so I didn't come to the Lord until my late 40s. At that time, I was running the defense business in D.C., and it started to, what I realized over time was, I didn't realize it was happening at the time, I didn't anticipate it, but it started to change my leadership style.
Yeah, so how? Because I'm always puzzled. There's always amazing people who don't have faith, who are, or different religious traditions, who are just the most top-notch, high-quality, high-character, high people, executives and leaders, and with or without faith. But it sounds like you had to change. Something was different.
Something changed
were you just
in me, and it was easier to see in hindsight.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up basically in fear of relationships. I grew up in a family where family relationships were not desired. Let's put it that way. People didn't get along, or they would go in and out of relationships.
Sort of hide or suppress feelings, that sort of stuff?
Well, they weren't so suppressed.
I'm getting the picture coming.
But they erupted periodically and would sever things and push people apart, and then over time they might drift back together. So I spent my life, literally, and I consciously thought about avoiding deep relationships, even with my wife. But when I made a commitment to Christ, and when you make that commitment, therefore you start, and I'd been still going to church for years, and by that time I had been hearing the gospel at the church we were going to in Virginia. So, I'd heard the messages, it just hadn't hit me. But when I made that commitment, you make that commitment, if you're serious about it, you want to learn more about the Lord, what role He has for you, if any, or what His plan is, and what you might do to participate in that and obey. And what hit me more than anything else from those studies was He asked for two things. He asked for a relationship with him, a personal relationship, and then deep personal relationships with the people around him. How else do you love people? How else do you love your neighbor other than having those relationships? And I was uncomfortable with that because I had spent my life trying to do just the opposite, and which is so typical. And but I began to work at it, and including at work. And I began to see people differently, as opposed to worrying about the processes and managing the business. I didn't recognize I was doing this, but we started. I can remember the day when I said to the HR folks, "We've got to focus more on leadership." I was still in Washington, we were doing that. When I came to New York, we did the same thing, and we spent a lot more time talking about leadership, training leadership, talking about behaviors. We started spending a lot of time talking about not so much what we wanted to do, but who we wanted to be.
Wow.
And it was much later, that I got to that point. It didn't happen overnight, but I can remember at the last executive conference that I was at, that was my discussion. Who do we want to be?
That's interesting. We are called human beings, not human doers.
Right.
We focus on that.
And because I came to the point of believing that who we were obviously had an impact on how we worked with all the people around us, and those relationships had the biggest impact on what we did.
Do you think people noticed it? Did anyone ever comment on it, or was it just sort of a quiet change that played in?
We should do 360 surveys.
Yeah.
You've all heard about that. And I can remember in one of those, there was a guy that I'd worked with in Washington and here in corporate headquarters. He actually got here before I did. And he said, "I've seen you go through 3 transformations. How did you do that?" And he was jabbing me a little bit, but I have had people tell me that I've changed, and because there was a lot of learning in there for me. I had to, a lot of leaders have this view that to be strong, you've got to be demanding, you've got to holler, you got to show anger. We had a guy one time who specialized in throwing chairs. And that's some leaders' perspective of how you really get people's attention and you get things done. Well, I never considered myself one of those, but there were people who worked for me who did.
Interesting.
And I may never have thrown a chair, but I guarantee you, and this probably happened in early 90s, I bet you I can go to one person to tell me he still remembers the day I threw my glasses across the desk. And the impact that it had on him, how that made him feel. And so, living out your faith, you can speak the loudest just by caring for the people around you the way you'd like to be cared for.
Wow. You shared that I mentioned this. Jay Warrencorn came and spoke as an Orthodox Jew about his faith, and he talked also about people issues and a transformation he went through, and he's told almost the same story. And he framed it, which my guess is you'd echo the words. He said, if you go back to Genesis 1, it talks about being created in the image of God, which means there's a little bit of the sacred in everybody.
A little bit, a lot.
Exactly. And so we were compelled by virtue of that to see the sacred in the other, even someone who might be our enemy. Yeah. And how do we love that person? What does that look like in business? And the same line of thinking is compelling.
Well, and what made it such a great experience for me, and here again, this wasn't planned out, I didn't anticipate it, and I didn't even know this was happening, along the way and told that there was some history there, some back over. But my job became so much more fun. I went from worrying about where we were going to get tomorrow's leaders to worrying about how are we going to find the opportunities for all these great people. It was a totally different perspective. Now the people didn't change.
Same fact pattern.
But my perspective changed as I got to know them and I got to understand them as you know, I never talked to them as, you know, being in the image of God or anything like that, but recognizing that these were human beings with families, livelihood, activities, and tremendous gifts as well as challenges. And but being able to look at them and see the gifts in them and what they were doing and the energy that they created gave me a totally different perspective.
Let me. One of the things we
I can't believe you found that. Careful what you put in writing.
By the way, don't feel bad if someone gets up. Different people have to get to the desk at different times. So we have an in and out policy. You shouldn't be worried.
Happens to me all the time.
Let me shift to different parts. One of the things we think a lot about GLF and that we've chatted a lot about ourselves, and that's a question of ethics. You know, it's a tough world. Particularly for a publicly traded company, the huge pressure to meet quarterly earnings, annual earnings, quarterly, almost even monthly now. If you're a penny off, your stock could go down 12% overnight. It's really easy to cut corners, or even the products you developed in the defense industry, controversial to some. How can you as a Christian be building defense products? So there's lots of levels of thinking about ethics and what you did. Would you share some of your thoughts about ethics as widely or as narrowly as you might? What do you think about that, Audrey?
Ethics is critically important. It's who we want to be, type of things, the values and the things that we hold on to. And what the practice that I developed is whenever I was with a group, somehow in the conversation I talked about ethics. Because it was, it's just too easy. There are just too many pressures that we put on the organization, the people in it, not to continually refresh that and rethink that and talk about it, and encourage people to talk about it. Now, and I say we talk about it, but you've got to put some teeth into what you say. And we, like most corporations, you know, we had our code of ethics, and we did training, and the legal guys could check the boxes and everything. And that was important because I think getting people to the point where they're comfortable and there's a process in place where they can ask questions. Nobody knows the answers to these questions. All you can do is ask the question and get enough people talking about it to hopefully come out with the right thing to do. It's what we used to talk about all the time. But I felt that what I thought was important was recognizing the pressures that we put on everybody. People do have quotas. People's bonuses dependent upon meeting the numbers. There's real dollars and cents behind this. So when you talk about ethics and not wanting to cross the line, and I used to use the term all the time, you know, there's the bright line, there's a white side, there's a dark side, and there's a gray side, and we don't even want to get near the gray line, you know, type of thing, because once it's gray, there's black in it, and you can't find that line. And so I should say that, but I realized that sounded good. But how does that help the guy trying to make a decision when he's trying to get an order, he's got a quota, or he's trying to get a product released on time? And so I came, and we spent a lot of time talking about this because I got to the point where I would say, if you have to get in gray to get the order, I don't want the order. And people said, you can't say that, you just gave everybody an hour. You know, when they miss their target, they're going to say, well, I couldn't because of this. I said, so be it. If you don't go that far, it's the same thing in engineering. If you can't meet this deadline by doing it right and getting all the things done that need to be done, don't miss it. And some people used to go nuts when I would say that. But if you don't say that, if you don't give people, you have to give people permission to do the right thing. All the words just lead to more confusion.
You give people permission. What might sort of be obvious, you actually stated.
Well, because all the pressures are the other way.
And I really appreciate you saying that, because I think sometimes when CEOs talk about doing the right thing, they don't say that PS that you just said, that recognition. They probably recognize it, but that you and the organization and the market and the marketplace are under huge pressure on it, huge pressure. And when we're under pressure, steam can sometimes cause a crack. So that you're that clear is terrific.
Not that we'd ever get in trouble. We got, there's always, things that we wish didn't happen.
As you look back over your career, no one's career, my own, and probably most people in this room are not linear from the top to the bottom to the top. There's dips, there's things you wish you could have a do-over or mulligans. If you look back sort of ethically or leadership-wise, if you could have any do-overs, decisions, and feel free to disguise the fact pattern a little bit, but what do-overs would you do if you could go back?
Well, I guess the biggest do-over would have been, I would have come to the realizations I did later in my career earlier. Just it's that simple. And that's one of the reasons why we do workforce ministries today. And I felt so led to that because I'd like people much younger in their lives, careers, to be able to hear these stories, to know that it's possible to have a successful business career and still integrate your faith with your work. Because that's what we do with workforce ministries as much as they do. We bring in speakers, senior people from these companies to talk about how they've done it and what's worked and what hasn't worked. So I was led to that because of that realization that it took me so long to get there. How would things have been different if I had been 25?
And asking this question.
And I'm always amazed at the 25-year-olds that I meet that are asking those questions today. I had my 16-year-old grandson last night was telling me, he's in a group with some other kids, and he's been asked to kind of tutor them. And he was telling me about how much joy he gets out of helping somebody. And, at 16, and, I said, well, at 16, I was nowhere, and what a blessing it was to hear that, by the way. But you just think about some of the young people today and challenges that they have growing up in today's society and everything that's available to them. And part of that availability also gives them some of these questions, the opportunity to ask some of these questions and think about it. It's great.
In a few minutes we'll open the floor up to questions from you to ask that you might have a clue about either what we talked about or anything else that's on your mind. But before that, let me ask another question. Last night when we had a lot of the young professionals here, the topic came up. We didn't have time to explore it, but I sort of rhetorically said, well, sometimes we might think, well, it's easy for a CEO. You're in the corner office. You've got all the power. You could take a sort of a high and mighty stand. But, you're not the young analyst. You're not the young engineer. You're not the young guy in quota. Okay, so what happens if I do this, my bonus, because I do what you say? The reality is, it hurts me. So there's some sense that it's easier for the top dog to take the high stand. What advice would you have for younger professionals or even mid-career professionals like we're here today who struggle with that tension? They want to do the right thing, but that pressure's there.
Yeah.
They may not have a boss like you either.
Right.
I'm talking about like when you became a relational boss.
Right. Lucky, right. But it's true. And I say that all the time. When I talk about my faith and the meager attempts that I made to integrate it at work later in my career, it's a lot easier when you're the boss. It was a lot more comfortable for me. And so I freely admit that to everybody. And that I was in error and not doing more earlier. But I'll try to answer that.
Just a little warning, in about 10 seconds there might be a big cannonball, and seeing as you're from the defense industry, we're not under attack.
I was in the artillery.
So, this is part of being a yacht club, so yeah, that's the common way to say hello.
I thought you just did that to wake everybody up. But I'll tell you what I hear from many of our workforce ministries speakers, because these are people, many of them who've had a much deeper and longer walk and have really done some amazing things with their companies, public companies as well as private companies. And what I hear from them is, while sometimes it may be easier, and then there's also conditions that make it tougher. But there was Phil McKinney, who was the Chief Technical Officer for HP, and he's now the CEO of Cable Labs. This is a lab that the cable industry created to develop new technology for the cable industry, which in my opinion would have been illegal. But apparently they got permission, they got some relief from the Department of Justice to be able to have this combined, much like telephone companies did years ago, technology labs. Anyway, he was one of our speakers, and so he was out in Silicon Valley for years, trying to live out his faith. And he said, you know, I never had a problem with HP, HR or legal or anything, talking about my faith. He said, I did have a problem with being on the board of directors of Boy Scouts. He said, you know, in Silicon Valley, the Boy Scouts are considered an hate organization. And he constantly got pressure to not speak to Boy Scout groups or to get off that board, which he refused to do. He said, but I was talking about faith, and nobody ever pushed back. And I came to realize that most of us, the biggest limiter is our own fear. And he said, not that you have to, you know, be a Bible-thumping evangelist. He said, but here again, the same things we've been talking about. How you relate to the people around you, the words you choose to use, how you handle difficult situations, how you know who's in charge. And more importantly, how you know or who you know you work for. One of the things that I've learned from these speakers the most is that I didn't think about when I was working, but I've learned since then. We all work for God. We have one boss. And he's an all-powerful, all-knowing,
tough share,
all-caring boss. If we approach our work recognizing that every day, things look very different. Whether you're a street cleaner, a hedge fund manager, CEO, or anybody in between, that requires that you do the best job you can at the job that he put you in at that given time. Not because somebody in the corner is telling you got to do it, but you have a spirit in you that says, this is who I am. This is what I do. God's put me here for a reason. I need to always ask him what that reason is, what I should be doing with it, and I need to be doing it in a manner which would be pleasing and honoring to him. And if he gives me the opportunity to do something else, fine, and if he doesn't, there's a reason.
You know, just yesterday in class, I was with my students, we were looking at the Protestant conception of calling, what's it going to be called. And so I took out two classic readings, one from John Calvin, sort of one of the founder of the father of modern Presbyterianism or the Reformed tradition, and also Martin Luther, the German reformer. And I had them read an essay by Martin Luther called, "Can a Soldier Be Saved Too?" Can a soldier be saved too? The point being that there's some lines of work that a Christian ought not be in, that there's something unholy about that. And he went on to say that he made an analogy to a surgeon or a doctor, and just as a surgeon sometimes has to cut off a leg and to do something painful to save the body, sometimes a soldier has to do violent acts to save a country. And so he was talking about that, but he said that he made a distinction between the office or the work that you hold and the office holder. So the job you do and how you do it, which is sort of what you're saying. And essentially he was saying that the Christian life can be active in many domains that we may not think of, but how you do that job, whether you're a soldier, whether you're a tax collector, a hedge fund manager, a street sweeper, how you do your job is as important as doing a job as if unto God. So I thank you for that in connection to Martin Luther. It makes me think of that. Let me open up to questions at this point. I've got several more in my mind if there aren't any from our friends, but I see Murph's hand up first.
How did you create accountability for the values that you espouse in ITT industry?
So how did you create accountability?
Formally, informally? Was it linked into some kind of performance management bonus?
So how did you create values for or accountability systems for the values that you espouse so they just weren't sort of empty words?
Well, of course, we had performance metrics and incentive systems and things like that. So that was the accountability for the kind of the business performance. But you know, what we're talking about are issues that are bigger than that in terms of who people are, how they behave, how they act when nobody's watching. So you know, when you hear that expression, it's who they are, and that's really by knowing them and reinforcing those values in all the conversations and all the things we do, and being able to do my best for living out those values, so that people are not confused or you know, concerned about I say one thing and doing another thing. Now that's hard to do all the time, and I'm sure there are many times where I cause that confusion. But I think it's the messaging that you go through all the time. So it's the way you live out your own career and your work.
Did you do maybe I'm not remembering this correctly, did you do a values-based Six Sigma? Did that tie into this at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes and no. We did, and this was one of the changes too in the way that I saw people. As Dick knows, I became a believer in lean tools and process improvement, the whole concept of continuous improvement. Having always worked in a multi-industry company, geographically dispersed around the world, this is the only business strategy I found that works every time, everywhere, wherever the culture is, whatever the business is, whatever the challenge is. And so by the time I got to New York, we rolled that out as a kind of corporate-wide strategy. But the thing about that, the reason I divert to that is those tools empower people to bring about change as a normal part of the business. And it's just like, and those changes really can reinforce or are reinforced by your values, because they're basically getting the frustration, the scrap, the rework, the unnecessary work and stuff out of the process, which makes the job more fun, the cost melts away, and more importantly, you have an opportunity to significantly improve your competitive position. And as we did that, and we called it value-based Six Sigma, when we did that was kind of a double entendre.
Okay.
Because
it brought business value as well as value.
Well, it talked about our values, but it also talked about value creation, because we talked about EVA, economic value added. And I'm always amazed at how many significant companies don't focus on real value creation. They worry about earnings, they worry about revenue growth, things like that. And they don't worry about value creation, which at the end of the day is the only thing the shareholders should be concerned about.
That's right.
And not only that, by real value creation, that means that you're doing something for your customers as well. And for the organization, the people in that organization. And so those tools, that strategy, kind of became the overarching strategy, no matter what business you were in ITT, no matter what segment of the market, no matter where in the world you were. And it also helped us, and we tied leadership training to that. We were the, I think, only company that we could identify at that time that started our Lean Six Sigma training with a week of leadership training. No matter where you were in the organization, that was part of that training, because that leadership training brought the values in.
That's right.
So it was kind of a, economic value added, but also our values. And so we carried that theme not only for value-based leadership, we did value-based product development, we did value-based leadership development. It was something we tied into our development, our HR policies.
That's
right. Like that. So,
another question.
Yeah.
Just a comment. I think it was very telling in 2005, the reaction of your board to the reason you gave for your resignation. Yeah. That, first of all, they considered it a crisis. Secondly, that they considered that it should be managed. Yeah. Third, that they probably paid, what, $100 grand? For
$250.
For a firm to, communicate what, was a simple declarative sentence. It was just very telling about what do you think why do you think they reacted that way? And if you were on the board now and the CEO told you the same thing as a reason for resignation, how do you think the board that you serve on should react to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I never really thought about it that way. But a large part of, I think, the reason they acted that way was I had no good explanation of what I was going to do, that, beyond what I said, which, I was healthy, company seemed to be doing well, there was no pressure to leave or anything. Why? Who gives this up? There's got to be something. I got G5, I got limo drivers, I get go wherever I want to go. You're going to walk away from this? So
they couldn't understand that.
You have to know people to really be comfortable with that. The other thing was the environment with all the accounting problems and everything. See, it would have been a lot more sense to me for them to call in the external auditor and say, is there any problem here? Then spend the $250,000. But there was no indication that there were any problems, and there weren't any problems. But I think the environment at the time really added to the problem and caused them to do that. I don't think they do that today, for example. And I don't know if somebody on a board that I was sitting on said that to me today, I'd ask questions. I don't think I'd come to $50,000, but I'd ask questions.
That's great.
Yeah.
First of all, I love being here. I'm here because your father-in-law sat next to me at a wedding and said you might enjoy this. And as a psychiatrist, I probably thought you needed one. Here's my question. It's a very different question than the business that guys are going to ask. I'm fascinated with C.S. Lewis's life and how he eventually came to love after he found God. And your story, and obviously I'm a shrink, so I'm going to ask this kind of question, but it's a question of universal interest. You talk about your childhood and all the fighting and the problems with intimacy. And the question is, did you come to love after you came to God? And how do you see that transition? Because for those of us who studied Lewis's life, it's perfectly obvious if he hadn't found God, he never would have found joy, which turned out to not only be his buzzword, but his wife's first name. So what's your thought about that?
25 years ago. I'll give you a second to read. So the question was, to paraphrase, the connection between C.S. Lewis, love of God, intimacy.
It's a simple question.
I don't know if I could pinpoint a time. I will tell you this. My calendar is busier as it's ever been. But I don't travel as much by far. I work hard at not traveling, so I'm busy, but I'm home every day. And you know, I've been married for 44 years, and I just am in awe of every day of how beautiful my wife is, and what a blessing it is to be able to see her every day. It's such a gift.
Why don't you give us a gift by just sharing those feelings? There are an awful lot of people that should be listening to you like that.
Thank you, though. That's,
Thank you.
It wasn't always that way.
We have a custom of punctually stopping at 8:15. It's almost there. Would you be able to tell shortly, or would it not do justice to it? You spoke once to me about a book, Letters from Dad, and that you've written, I think, to Zach and to Jake. Can you, in a short, can you share that within it? Because we talk about relationships, faith, love, and at the end of the day, work is what we do. It's part of our life. It's part of our calling. But would you mind ending us on that note?
Sure. Well, I'll try to go. There's a book, Letters from Dad, by a guy who started a ministry teaching people how to write letters to their families. And because it had been so important, his father had been killed, and his mother, when he grew up, showed him these letters that his father had written him when he was a small child, and his father was in the military, still in the war. And the impact it had on him. And so he started out in his local church and everything, talking about this. And the importance of sharing how you feel, putting down your thoughts and encouragement and stuff to children, grandchildren, anybody, your wife. And he had a whole different categories of, you speak to your wife, you speak to your sister, your son, your daughter. And
did you adopt some of this stuff?
Well, of course, I work with the Postal Service, so I try to put things in the mail as much as possible.
What's that?
So I try to write letters periodically. And there's another thing. The Postal Service has a lot of postcards that it sells, or with stamps, the postage already on them, which just have nothing but beautiful pictures on them. Most of them from different places in this country, beautiful geography pictures you can get by the post office. And so the other thing I do is that I just send these post offices from the Okanoki swamp, and to my grandkids periodically, or I send them postcards with all how many cartoon characters or something to have on them, just so they get something in the mail. You know about you, but, you know, not just because they work at the post office, but first of all, we don't get many personal letters in the mail anymore, but when you do, it's a special occasion. It's a special event. And I was with the CEO of Hallmark recently, who's a firm believer in that. It is a special event. And you know, how do you live out your faith? How hard is it to scribble little lines on a postcard and touch somebody?
Well, I appreciate you doing, you know, as an aside, Karen, my wife, we have 5 nieces, but for 2 of them, she's particularly close to them. Since they were 7 years old, every month on the first of the month, she's written them a postcard. And she initially wrote them to both of them, but they would fight over who got to keep it. Now she writes since 2, and they're each designed to their personalities. And they never, like, said thank you or anything, so we thought, well, why am I doing this? And then we went to visit them once, all over